Great to see you all. I just have a few minutes before I'm in the worst spot to speak, just before lunch. I hated classes just before lunch. So don't think about lunch yet. Give me your attention for just a few minutes. First, I have a present for you, a little flagon of the holy water blessed by Saint John Paul II. So it will be poured into a little bowl, and you guys can bless yourselves. Just take a little bit so that it's enough for everybody, but it's been blessed by Saint John Paul II. So you can bless yourselves with this holy water. So my speech is supposed to be like Italian sausage, short and sweet. I want to begin with beautiful words of Pope Emeritus Benedict XVI, who said this about Saint John Paul II. Everyone knows Saint John Paul II, his face, his characteristic way of moving and speaking, his immersion in prayer and spontaneous cheerfulness. Many of his words have become indelibly engraved in our memories, starting with the passionate plea when he was elected, "Open wide the doors to Christ, and be not afraid of him." Be not afraid. This was the singular great statement of Karol Wojtyla when he was elected Pope. On October 22nd, his first Mass in St. Peter's Square, he was 58 years old, full of energy, and he was calling to the peoples of the world to open their hearts to Christ, which was very powerful. Do not be afraid. You know, I was told, I didn't check it, but I was told that the words "do not be afraid" appear 365 times in the Bible. Once for each day, the Lord is telling us, do not be afraid. Some of the great moments in the salvation history, Mary sees the angel, he tells her, "Do not be afraid, Mary." Joseph has a vision of the archangel in the dream. "Joseph, do not be afraid to take Mary into your home." Jesus told us, "Don't be afraid of those who can kill the body." Courage, it is I, do not be afraid. I can go on and on. Many places in the Bible, this powerful call from the Lord for us not to be afraid. Now, St. John Paul II was a man of great courage, but he was not a man who never experienced fear. Let's not make a mistake about it. He was not a man who was never afraid. I do not know if such a man was ever born. Fear is a normal human reaction. Even our blessed Lord, in trepidation, sweated blood in the Garden of Gethsemane, knowing what was awaiting him. So the point is not that we will never be afraid, because we will, but we can control and conquer that fear with the help of the grace of Christ, and we will not let dictate our actions, our behavior, our decisions, and how often we allowed our fear to creep in and influence what we do. This call of John Paul II is for us. Do not be afraid. Don't let fear control your life. And in the life of Karol Wojtyla, you could see in many moments how, through the grace of Christ at work in his life, he was able to conquer his own fear and to serve humanity and to preach the good news of Jesus Christ. One personal memory, Travis mentioned I was 10 months old when Karol Wojtyla was elected to papacy, so he was the only pope I remembered when I was little. In my grandmother's bedroom, there was a big painting of the Holy Family, the famous one, Jesus working in the carpenter's shop, little Joseph, little Jesus, and Mary. On the right side, Our Lady of Częstochowa, very dear to the Polish people. And then on the left side, the painting of then Pope John Paul II. I got to know him not personally, but through my family very early in my life. Maybe I was already 4 years old when for the first time I asked my grandma, who is this? Oh, that's the Pope, Karol Wojtyla. And the personal connection of mine started. I may attribute, my priestly vocation to him. He inspired so many Polish men and boys to follow in his footsteps. There was an explosion of vocations actually in Poland in the 80s and 90s because of Karol Wojtyla and how he lived his priesthood, how he loved being a priest, how with so much courage he was able to go and travel all around the world to proclaim the good message. But this is the challenge I have for you fathers and grandfathers. My faith was so much influenced by the externals. Many people say externals are not that important. Yes, they are. They are very important. I would go to my grandmother's room and I was surrounded by holiness. The holy pictures, the holy paintings, the holy water, rosary. That's how you can influence your kids and grandkids. Make sure that you have images of saints in your house on display so that their environment speaks of our great calling and our faith. It was very important to me as I was growing up to have that, to have those pictures in my house that spoke to me. It's hard to follow Mariusz after he spoke so eloquently about his experience of John Paul II. He mentioned a couple things. I want to tell you how Karol Wojtyla was conquering fear in his own life. You know that he experienced a lot of tragedy in his life, a lot of loss. 9-year-old boy losing his mother, I have no idea. Maybe some of you have lost your mom when you were little boys. What an experience that must have been. What a tragedy for him as a young little boy. His sister Olga died before even he was born. He never met her. His brother Edmund dies contracting the scarlet fever. He was a medical doctor, a student. And so that tragedy already in his young life, thankfully he had somebody who was his mentor, guide, and the support system. And that was his father, Karol Wojtyla Sr. And I want to focus on him a little bit here because I want to speak to you fathers and to tell you how great and important your vocation is and what you can do for your families and for your children and grandchildren, how important the role of the father is. Let me begin with the statistics. There was a study done which when I read it, I was shocked. A study done in the late 90s in Switzerland about the role of the fathers in religious upbringing of children. Okay, so listen to the findings of this study, how surprising they are. If both father and mother, okay, if you have two parents and they go to church regularly, okay, if they're Catholics, 33% of their children will end up being practicing Catholics. You may say that's not that many. Well, that's 1/3 roughly, right? They will be practicing Catholics, okay, if mom and dad practice the faith. 41% will attend church but not regularly. 1/4 will end up not practicing at all. That's from my experience, how often I hear from parents, what did I do wrong? I raised my kids in the faith and they are not practicing anymore. But that statistics is quite striking. If father and mother both practice, 33% of their kids will be practicing Catholic. But listen to this now. If the father is wishy-washy, if he doesn't practice faith regularly, and mother is practicing her faith, only 3% of the children would subsequently become regulars themselves. From 33%, it goes down to 3%, while a further 59% will become irregulars. 38% will be lost. That is shocking enough, but listen to the final point. If the father is not practicing and mother is practicing the faith, only 2% of children will become regular worshipers. Can you imagine that? Only 2%. Over 60% will be completely lost to the church. Men, you have tremendous responsibility of passing on the faith to the next generation. How important the role of the man is in the family life, in passing on the faith. This study was very extensive, and it speaks volumes about the enormity of your vocation. When I think of the life of Karol Wojtyla, his father, after Emilia Kaczorowska, his mom, died, picks up the baton and takes responsibility for little Karol and raises him up, continues to raise him up in the faith. He was the great example for small Karol Wojtyla of how to be a man and how to be a Catholic. Karol Wojtyla, the Pope, attributes a lot of good things in his life to his father, Karol Wojtyla Sr., because he played such an important role. So after school on Sundays, he recalled, I would walk with my dad, I would ask him questions, he would spend time with me. They would go on a pilgrimage from Wadowice to Kalwaria Zebrzydowska, where they would walk the Stations of the Cross. His father was available to him. His father was there for him, and his father was a lover of God. And that's how Karol Wojtyla was formed. In later years, the Pope recalled, the years of my childhood and youth are primarily connected with the figure of my father. Now imagine, just speculate for a moment, if he didn't have Karol Wojtyla Sr. in his life. Who knows what he would have ended up? Experiencing tragedy so early in life. Later, John Paul II reflected on that later in life, and he said this about his father: I could watch him closely and saw how much he demanded of himself. So he learned by example mostly. He just watched his father as his father was living the faith, how much he demanded of himself. This was extremely important at the time, which means so much for an adolescent boy. Father who was very demanding of himself, in a sense, did not need to demand of his son. Looking at him, I learned that people should be demanding toward themselves and commit themselves to fulfilling their obligations. Now you know where it comes from when John Paul II as a pope would speak to young people. Demand of yourself even if nobody else is demanding anything from you. He learned that in early years when he was growing up from his own father, the sense of duty, the love of the country, the love of Mary, the deep spirituality, but perhaps most importantly, the love of the cross. Mario mentioned the place of suffering in the life of Karol Wojtyla. He learned to love the cross from his father, a man of high culture, a great patriot, and a great man of faith. He was not over the top, always talking about God, but he was a man of deep faith who just taught his son through the example of his own life. And that's how Karol Wojtyla was formed. In the book, Crossing the Threshold of Hope, he said, my father provided in my home my first seminary. It was like a seminary that when he was trained in his faith. Now, did you know that Karol Wojtyla didn't think about the priesthood until he was in his early 20s? He wanted to become an actor. He was in love with Polish literature, in Polish culture. That was his dream. In 1939, the Second World War started, invasion of the Soviet Russia and Nazi Germany into Poland. And it was that time of the great personal transformation of John Paul II. Now, keep in mind, do not fear, do not be afraid. It was a time of great fear. Fear was something that you lived with day in and day out. When your friends are dying all around you, when you can be captured any time by Gestapo and imprisoned, you woke up with fear and you went to bed with fear. And John Paul II, as a young man, he develops even deeper his spirituality, and his question is, how do I address this evil and violence by living my life? What is God calling me to do? You know, you always learn new things. I thought I knew quite a bit about John Paul II, but last week I read an article. I forgot the name of the author. I should have written it down. But anyway, it was about this dreadful day because Karol Wojtyla, he lived in Kraków with his father. You had to have a work permit. If you were caught by the Germans not having work, you could have been sent to Auschwitz or other concentration camp. So every man of Karol Wojtyła's age has to go to work. And you remember, he worked in the quarries. He would walk for miles in the morning, would work in the quarry and then come back home. His father is ailing already, is getting more and more sick. On this dreadful winter day in 1941, young Karol Wojtyła kisses his father goodbye in the morning, says, "Dad, I will see you when I come back." He would hope to bring some potato or something for dinner. He walks to work, comes back in the evening. It was already dark. He opens his room. He enters into his quarters, and his father is dead. He kneels his father was he kneels by the armchair, and later he said, when he reflected on that, "I have never felt so alone." He's in the early 20s. He has lost everyone that he loved at that time in his life. I cannot even imagine that. You know, his whole family is dead. He's completely alone. And this article that I read kind of claimed that maybe he felt a little bit guilty that his dad died by himself, that he wasn't there for him. And he's sobbing and weeping. Entire night he spent crying there in that room. And the neighbors that lived next door, they came in, they helped him with the funeral arrangements, and they said, "We gotta take him in. We can't leave Karol Jr. on his own in this tragedy." So they invited him to live with them. But that day perhaps was the day when God touched the heart of this young man, because from that moment on, when he experiences the death of his father, his spirituality becomes deeper and deeper and deeper. And he discovers his vocation to the priesthood, that the priesthood is the perfect response to that evil all around him. You know, and then he was ordained in 1945, having gone through the clandestine seminary with Archbishop Adam Sapiecha. Now, I want to mention to you the role of mentors. Karol Wojtyła was the lucky man because he had beautiful mentors in his life. The role of mentor is so important. An example of somebody that you can look up to. The first was his father, as I said. Second was Cardinal Adam Sapiecha, the prince of the church in Kraków, man of extreme courage. He would dine with Hans Frank, who was the chief of the general government in Nazi-occupied Poland. Evil man. He had blood on his hands of hundreds of thousands of Polish people and countless Jews. And he would go to dine with him in the Wawel when he resided and would challenge him to his face about his crimes. Adam Sapiecha was like fearless. You know, he could have been arrested and killed. But young seminarian Karol Wojtyla is looking up to him and learns from him. He sees that if you serve God, you don't have to be afraid. There is spiritual power available to you that comes from God, that you can look evil in the face and you can conquer your own fear. In 1945, he is ordained to the priesthood. And unfortunately, Poland has lost war twice, once in 1939 and then in 1945, because we were not liberated. We were simply taken over by the communist Russia. Stalin forces came in, and now the church finds itself in Poland in this very challenging situation of the communist persecution by the government. And Karol Wojtyla enters, he is a young priest, and he's trying to figure out how to challenge the communist regime and how to live his priesthood and to be with the people who are persecuted, who are trampled down, and he wanted to give them hope. That was his entire mission, to give people hope who were very often deprived of hope. And Cardinal Sapieha sent him to further study, and then he, of course, became involved with the young people. I'm almost out of time, unfortunately, but another mentor that I have to mention, that many of you know, he will be beatified, and I'm so joyful about that, because I thought he should have been beatified a long time ago. It's Cardinal Stefan Wyszyński, the great primate of Poland, who ruled the Polish church through communism. He was also a fearless man. The communists imprisoned him from 1953 to 1956 because he challenged their attack on the freedom of religion. He was an important mentor to the young priest, Karol Wojtyla, and then later bishop. And they worked together so closely in order to give people hope. There were so many other moments in the life of Karol Wojtyla when you can kind of pin down and see his bravery and courage. One thing I can mention is his assassination attempt in 1981. I mean, imagine having that experience in your life, and then he goes out of the hospital and continues to see people like that. I would have the memory of being shot all the time with me, right? If that happened to you, but he wanted to still be with the people. He knew that God was with him, and then Mary protected him. He was a man of tremendous courage. And finally, the end of his life wasn't that courageous with the power with which he faced his own suffering and demise with the Parkinson's disease, how he embraced the cross, the famous picture of him, Good Friday, few days before he died, holding the crucifix where he couldn't be in Colosseum for the way of the cross. He embraces the crucifix. When they pray the Stations of the Cross, Christ was so important to him. He gave him his entire life, and it was Christ who gave him that courage. So, dear fathers, grandfathers, if you are, you have a tremendous vocation. That's what I want to close with. Your vocation is so important. Be mentors to your sons and daughters too, but be mentors to your sons. If you have grandsons, be mentors to them. Give them your time. Two more minutes story. A son comes to his daddy and says, "Daddy, may I ask you a question?" "Yeah, sure, what is it?" "How much do you make an hour?" "That's none of your business. Why do you ask such a thing?" "I just want to know, Daddy. Please tell me, how much do you make an hour?" He made quite a bit, because he says, "I make $100 an hour." He must have been a lawyer. "Oh," the son told him, "Wow, $100. Daddy, can I please borrow $50? And the father said, Why do you need to borrow my money? I'm busy right now." So later, the boy goes to the bedroom. The father comes in because he felt kind of guilty that he dismissed him. He goes to the bedroom and says, "Are you asleep, son?" "No, Daddy, I'm awake." "Well, I've been thinking maybe I was too hard on you earlier. It's been a long day. I work a lot. I took my aggravation on you." here is the $50 that you have asked for. The boy sat up in the bed smiling. Oh, thank you, Daddy. Then reaching under the pillow, he pulled out some crumped up bills. And the father saw that the boy already had money, and then said to him, why did you need more money? Because I didn't have enough. Now I have $100. Daddy, can I buy 1 hour of your time? That's what your son wants from you. He doesn't care that you work 17 hours a day. He doesn't care that you buy him, new laptop every couple months. All that the boy wants from you is your time. He wants him to be his mentor. He wants him to be to be the example. And that's what John Paul II had in his life. And maybe that's why he became such a great man, because we all need mentors. I need a mentor. You guys need mentors. Your sons need mentors. So if anything you take out of my little talk, think about Karol Wojtyla Sr. He probably was smiling at heaven, looking at how he raised his little boy, Lolek, and what became of him, and how God used his father to raise up this great man. Thank you. Go for lunch and enjoy the rest of your conference.